show about making the moments matter. I'm your host, Elisa Gums. Today, we're chatting about managing some of the most difficult relationships in our lives, our relationships with family. Joining us is licensed therapist and best-selling relationship expert Nedra Glover Tawwab, author of the new book, Drama Free: A Guide to Managing Unhealthy Family Relationships. Nedra, we're so excited to have you here on the Clock. How are you today?
I am well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm a little under the weather actually, but sometimes it's like that and we just got to push through. So
Yeah.
we're going to make the most of it. Since your first book, you've really blown up. And you've been featured everywhere from Oprah and Good Morning America to Red Table Talk and The Breakfast Club. But you've been doing this work for a long time. You have 15 plus years as a therapist. How did you come to be a relationship therapist?
Well, I have been in relationships my whole life, which I would say is a considerable amount of experience. But I have been studying relationships professionally for 15 years. Most of the things that people talk about is in relationship to other people and other things, even if they're talking about social media, even if they're talking about work, those things are relationships. And so I had to think about what are some of the key things in our relationships that don't typically work well for us? How do we have healthier relationships with people? How do we have healthier relationships with our time? How do we have healthier relationships with all the things that matter to us? With family, there seems to be this idea that we have to make a lot of exceptions to what might be healthy because it is our mom, it is our dad, it's our cousin, or whoever it is. It's like, but since it's this person gets to cuss me out occasionally. I would never let a friend do that. But if it's my dad, I have to give him that pass. I would never let a boyfriend or girlfriend do that. But if it's my cousin, I have to give them that pass. So, how do we, you know, be in healthy relationships, not just romantically or in friendships, but also in family relationships? It's not always leaving the relationship. It could be letting people know, hey, you cannot cuss me out. That's not okay behavior. When you start to do that, this is what I'll do. I'll walk away or I'll say, hey, let me talk to you later. Or I may just hang up because I can't take anymore and you're not listening. So, coming up with some strategies to deal with these behaviors that are unhealthy from the people you love can be very helpful for you and your relationships.
Yeah. The book is all about family relationships. Why is family always such a complicated subject?
Oh, we have beliefs about what's possible with certain people. We learn how to read energy. We learn, what people we can, elicit certain emotions from, who we can talk to, who we can't talk to, what they will tolerate and what they won't tolerate. And so as we're becoming adults and coming more into ourselves, we already know there are just certain things I can't say to my grandmother. There are just certain things that I can't, do around my sister. We've had years of learning this person and understanding what does and doesn't work for the relationship. And so we are just, we're so wise and so smart, and we're just doing what we already know we're supposed to do. But what happens is, it's hard to keep up. It makes us feel uncomfortable. It makes us feel inauthentic in these relationships. And so there we hit a wall and we're like, oh my gosh, like this thing is really bothering me. And I don't know what to do about it. It's for me to sit with, and I have to deal with, these certain things from this certain person. And the truth of it is, you don't have to deal with certain things, you choose to. And if you really
Mm.
operate in choice, you can begin to make different choices. And hopefully, you make a choice to not deal with certain behaviors from people.
That's such a big distinction, and we're going to get back to that later. But as we stick on family relationships, not only are they complicated, but they're also so important. There's a quote in the book that really hit me, which is how people engage in the family is usually how they engage in the world.
Mm.
Can you explain that?
Well, I've also often heard women say, I don't do female friendships. And once you start talking to these women, they don't have healthy relationships with women in their families. They often don't have healthy relationships with their sisters, with their mother. And so they don't do healthy relationships because they haven't seen any healthy relationships work between women. And so it's not just these friends that are the problem, it's a whole system of female relationships that they are missing out on. Not always the case, but a lot of times that is the case. It is very hard for us to implement strategies that we've never had to implement before. And so if I can't trust these people in my family, how can I go out and trust a stranger to consider me in certain ways, to, honor certain values about me? Often we don't. We just start to avoid people, or we start to repeat some of the patterns that we have established in our families. I think about um, how normal it is in some families to engage in a certain level of gossip about family members. And those people don't just gossip about family members, they gossip about friends too. And those are things that ruin friendships. When we get into dating relationships, many of us are looking to perfect some of our family stuff. I wasn't taken care of as a child. I have to have this person that does all of these things that I never had before. Well, that creates a lot of stress in a dating relationship because that person isn't meant to, give you a head on your towel when you was 10. And, all of this old energy we put on this new person. Now, this person can help you in some ways, but there are some things that they were not meant to do in your life. And so when we're taking all of that family stuff and putting it on friends and romantic partners and coworkers, it is a lot for other relationships. And we really struggle in those relationships too, not just the family ones, because we're carrying all of this, mental and emotional baggage.
The other thing I found really eye opening about the book is that exploring your family relationships isn't just about how you relate to them, but also about how you relate to yourself and how
Mm,
you figure out how to separate who you are now from who you were
mm,
raised to be. Can you
mm.
tell me more about that process?
Yeah, I think of the ideas that our parents or family members may have for who we become. And often it is a version of them, or it is a better version of a person that they didn't become. And either of those things, placing your desires for another human's life, is really challenging because people will often disappoint you. Mom, if you didn't become a dancer, I might not want to be a dancer either. So to put that pressure on someone, sometimes we start to see that resentment and animosity build up in relationships. In families, we should be allowed to, establish our lives, design our lives, create what we want, and those things should be respected. But unfortunately, there is some pushback sometimes when it's not in alignment with what other people want you to be.
Yeah. I love the title of the book, Drama Free, especially in our community. So many of us say that we want lives that are drama free, but then we keep inviting drama into our life. Why are we like this?
It's a habit. It's a habit cycle. It is really a habit to be in drama with people. And sometimes that is the only thing that keeps our relationships with people going. Have you ever tried to have a relationship with someone who's highly dramatic, based around peaceful things? Like, girl, let's go get some plants. They don't want to do that. They want to be in chaos. They want to, girl, did I tell you what so and so? Like, those people who are constantly just bringing up some stuff. And here I am, like, have you tried the new banana Twizzlers? Like, they're just not going to get into that. It has to be some stuff. There are people who really, because of their history, this is the only way they know how to exist. Chaos is what they do. Peace is too much quiet, right? And so they have to
Mhm.
keep stuff going sometimes. It's unfortunate and it's sad. And I think if you are the person saying, I don't want that, you have to change your habits with this person. Our work is not to make the dramatic person less dramatic, it is to change our habits with this person. As they're conjuring up things, we have to be our peaceful selves. Um, I'm reminded of a time where a particularly dramatic family member said to me, and she didn't even come to your party. What did you think about that? I said, I didn't think about it. I didn't think about it. And I'm not thinking about it now. I wasn't at a party having fun thinking, she's not here. I'm gonna call her tomorrow like I regularly do and go on with my life. But that is a way to create some drama. I'm not in the drama cycle. If you want to have an issue that's not even really your issue, you go and do that. But I also want you to know this is not a thing that I'm getting into. So sometimes it's not, the drama will come to you and it's all about how do I respond to this thing that I really don't want to be a part of. Sometimes it's saying, some uncomfortable, hard things and saying, that sounds like a lot and I don't want to be involved in it. Or, wow, that sounds like some information for that person to know and maybe not me.
Wow. Two words that you just said, conjuring and control. I know in so many of the conversations I have with people about their family relationships, they think that if they can just change the situation that this person is in, if they can just fix this problem, if they, then things will be different. And as you said, people who like drama conjure drama. There's no amount of fixing the problems that they have that will get you out of it. And
Mhm.
there's no amount of controlling them. We have to control ourselves. Is that,
Mhm.
you think, the hardest lesson for people, that at the end of the day they can't control what anyone else does?
Wouldn't the world be a better place if we could just change people? I think so. I think so. I'm waiting for that superpower. You know how it's that movie where a person gets struck with lightning and then they wake up with some magic ability? I want changing people to be my ability. Not very realistic, but a girl can dream. And I
A
think
girl
most of
can dream.
us, that's what we that's what we hope for. Like, oh, this would be so much better if they just X, Y, and Z. And it's like, you're gonna have to do the really hard work. It's not going to be them having this awakening. They can have the information in their hand. One of the questions I often get is, I gave my family member your book. How do I make them change? They have the same book that you have. They don't have to read it. And if they read it, they don't have to apply it. They can read that book and think that you are the jerk. They may not read that book and say, oh, look at me in chapter 6. They may not see that book and say that that's them in chapter 6. They may say that book and say, oh, this person is terrible. As a matter of fact, I think they're gaslighting me. Like they may get something completely different from the book. We can't make people get stuff. That's changing them. People have to be open. They have to want to be accountable for things. One huge way that I love for to see some accountability is a apology.
Mm,
But there are lots of people who never apologize. They won't admit anything because accountability means some sort of self-awareness. And there are just some folks who are not very self-aware. They will always point the finger. They will always blame. These are not, things we can take out of the population. It's just that way. And sometimes those people are family members. Sometimes those people are our friends.
yeah. You mentioned normal earlier when you were saying in
Mhm.
some families it's normal to gossip. One of the lasting takeaways that I personally got from therapy was how misunderstood the word normal is.
Mm.
Because whatever you experienced all the time growing up became normal to you, whether it was healthy or not. So, saying we behave like this because it's normal is not really saying what you think it's saying. How can we identify if the patterns that we have in our family interactions are healthy or if they're dysfunctional, whether or not they're normal?
Here's a measure. Would you tolerate it from other people? If certain things were happening in your relationships, would you say, it's okay if my friends hang up on me when they get upset? It's okay if my friends call me names. Like there are certain things that happen in family. It's okay if people borrow stuff from me and don't give it back. It's okay if, every time I try to talk to people about stuff, they just tell me no, no, no. You don't need to feel that. You need to feel this. Most of us will say no, that would be problematic. Like if I had a friend that did that, if I had a romantic partner that did that, if my boss or my coworker was doing that, I would have a problem with that. But when it's someone in your family, it's like, oh, I can't have a problem with that. There is a way that I have to learn to build my tolerance to deal with what this person is throwing my way.
Wow. I think probably the most empowering thing about your book is that it shows people that they can decide what role trauma plays in their lives. They can decide how to interact with their family members. They don't have to accept the things that they had to accept as children. They can make different choices. As you said earlier, we are choosing to be in these types of relationships with people. If someone out there is wanting to make a change in how they relate to their family, what would you suggest as their first step?
Hmm. Step one, identify, like make a list of what you think the issues are. And next to that, make some suggestions for what you can do differently, not what the person needs to do, how their behavior needs to change, but what you can do. If they do this, then you will respond in this way. If they never change, this is how you will show up in the relationship. Don't make it about them having to do anything because chances are um, they might or they might not. It's a 50-50 shot. There are times where people are like, you know what, I do want to make some changes to preserve this relationship. But we break our hearts sometimes because people tell us no, or they're simply not doing it. And we're like, you've got to make this change. You've got to make this change. We can have relationships with people who have, maybe some unhealthy behaviors, or, maybe we have to exist with things we'd rather not see them do. We can still have those relationships. It doesn't mean we need to cut them off. It just may mean you figure out how you deal with them. You figure out what is the frequency, what sort of things can you talk to them about. If you have a mother that's really judgmental and hard on you, there may be certain things you can share and certain things you can't share. It doesn't mean you don't never need to talk to her again. It just might mean that y'all talk about TV shows. You may not want to tell her about who you're dating, and so we decide what relationships look like based on the other person in the relationship with us.
As you're talking about those things that we decide, I want to talk about boundaries for a minute. Your first best selling book was called Set Boundaries, Find Peace. Can you share how healthy boundaries contribute to good relationships?
Healthy boundaries really create roles and expectations in relationships. Without any boundaries, we don't have any healthy relationships. Very often, we may feel like having boundaries is offensive in family relationships when it is really life giving. It is the opportunity for people to show up as authentic, full people and be accepted. I will not remove my love if you don't like my macaroni and cheese. I will not remove my love if you don't like the same music as me. I will not remove my love if you go to college and I don't go to college. Like some of these divisive things, it's like, you know, we can be different and I can still love you. There can be other things that we connect around. And so, with boundaries, we're able to better be ourselves. Without them, there's a lot of pretending. Usually, there is a way of showing up that's inauthentic, and we really want to move closer to authentic relationships instead of those relationships where we're having to change who we are to be in relationship with certain people.
Yeah. I think that over the last few years with the pandemic, we've all had a chance to reimagine how we live our
Mhm.
lives. And for a lot of people, family was part of that. Who do you consider family? What risks are you willing to take for your family? What makes you
Mhm.
feel connected to them? And even what family traditions are important to you? Do you find that we're in a time where people are now questioning some of their long held beliefs about family?
Mm. No, I think we are in a time where people are doing something differently about it. I can't say that people haven't always had some issues with their family. Is there more self awareness around how they feel about it? Perhaps. But I think there was always something there. If I go back and watch old TV shows without them saying it, you can kind of like, oh, it's something between that mother and father. Like I think it was just something that was unspoken. And now we have, people actually saying, my issue with my mother is that she favors my sibling. My issue with my sibling is that, you know, they're very jealous of me or whatever it is. Like you have more people saying this, but I don't think it's a new thing that's happening. I think we have language, we have more mental health services, we have social media where you can look up all these things on, what a relationship problem is. We just have more resources. And so we are speaking about it more, but I certainly don't think it's occurring more often. I think families are the same. I can't imagine family 60 years ago, it probably was worse. Like, I just think people were really indoctrinated and they thought they had to deal with some, really tragic things in families in a way that people are like, I don't really have to deal with that sort of thing anymore.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned social media. Your social media is such a resource for everyone out there. And so is the book. You have specific advice in it for dealing with parents, siblings, children, in laws, blended families, and extended family. Because this show is aimed at Black women, I'm going to ask if you have any advice specifically for Black women. We carry so much of the emotional load when it comes to
Mhm.
our families, and we tend to
Mhm.
suffer in silence. So, can you just speak to us a little bit?
I will speak to the last piece of what you said about suffering in silence. Stop doing it. If you are among other Black women, you are in community. So I would say find people who understand some of the things that you're working with. And I wouldn't say just Black women, but Black men also. It can be very tough sometimes to show up as we do as people who are unbothered, unoffended, have to stay strong. That's a lot of work. That is a lot of work to hold in tears at a funeral, to not be upset when something is really bothering you. And I want us to let that load go, male or female. It is too much to carry. We need to start crying when we feel like crying and being happy when we feel like being happy and talking through things when we need to talk through them instead of all of this unbotheredness that we do. I think it's tragic. When I see people who can't open up emotionally, I'm like, gosh, they have so much going on and they can't even talk to themselves about it. Whoa, that's really tough. I don't know that feeling because I'm going to call 8 people. Hey girl, you got a minute? Therapist, can I get another? Like, I'm calling I want it out of me. I'm gonna journal about it. I'm gonna watch the color purple. It's getting out of me. I don't want to walk around with that. It's a heaviness that really taints our lives. It impacts the way that we raise our children. It impacts the way that we show up in romantic relationships where you have to be tough. It's like, I don't want to be that tough. I just want to show up and, be who I am and, not play games or put on a facade. When I'm upset, I want to be upset. When we have an issue, I want to talk through it. That's where I am. I think that Black women have to get closer to being our full selves in our relationships and further away from the protection that we have had to have. We've had to have some level of protection to keep this whole thing going. I get it. But we also have to realize when it is time to let some of that go. And you have people who this is your time to let it go. You've made it. You don't have to, be as tough as you were 10 years ago. You've made it. Now come on down some. So we have to learn how to shed that in the times when we can and with the people that we can. Now, it might not be everybody. It might just be a few people, but we all need someone. So if it's not a friend or family member or spiritual representative we could talk to, we have to find mental health services. We have to find, maybe some coaching. We need to do something so we're not keeping it all in.
Yeah. This has been so enlightening. Thank you so much, Nedra, for sharing the unique ways you're helping people make the most of the time we've been given by helping us heal our most formative relationships. And thank you all for watching On the Clock. We'll see you next time as we continue to talk about living with passion and working with purpose.